I'm excited to introduce our panel today and give them as much time as possible to share with you. To my immediate left is Brooks Henderson. He is Harvard trained and very humble about that, which I love. And he has also worked for years in the energy sector, and he just recently retired from Kinder Morgan. He's one of our most faithful mentors in YBL, and when I thought of a panel on mentoring, he was one of the first names that came up. Second, in the middle is Don Menendez. Don has been the CEO of a IT company centered in the healthcare space called White Plume. And he actually interviewed me when I came to YBL 10 years ago. I've been a board member at YBL, a faithful man, father, husband, and a very wise man. I've frequently said I think Don Menendez might be the wisest man in Birmingham, and I'm not trying to put pressure on you by saying that. And then to our left is Jordan Weaver, and he is a commercial real estate broker with Ironvest Realty. He's a younger guy. You might be like, what doesn't fit in this picture? He is 27 years old, but he's speaking at a second half panel because of some of his experiences, both being a mentor and being a protege. And just a super sharp, dynamic young man, just recently married. And his boss told me, keep an eye on Jordan. He's going to be running Birmingham one day. So that's our panel. I'm excited to have them here and for you all to get to know a little bit more about them. So first question, wide open softball. Please share a little bit about your background and experience so that our audience can get to know you. I hope I didn't spoil all your anecdotes with my introduction.
Yeah, I grew up in Birmingham, attended Mount Brook High School. I was in high school, high school young life with Walter Gresham, where I became a Christian. Of course, that's the most important decision you can make in your life. So that was a major part of my life in high school, played sports. Attended Alabama, a big Alabama fan. My grandfather went there, my dad was a brother. See, we're all in. My daughter married Hoot Ingram's grandson, so we're all in Alabama. And then after that, I majored in finance, and then I worked 2 years at Compass Bank, and then went to Harvard Business School and won a very prestigious award up there. I was 20% foreign students up there in the class from Japan, Korea, South America, hardly speak any English. And I won the most improved foreign-speaking student with my son lunch in. So I'd go in a restaurant, they go, just keep talking, just keep talking. But after that, I went and worked for 40 years at Sonat. They got acquired by El Paso, then Kinder Morgan. And we have natural gas pipelines underneath the ground that transports natural gas to Spire, Atlanta gas slide across the southeast, and to heat your homes and provide business for natural gas. I have 2 daughters. I married at a later age at 37, had children at 41 and 44. So any single guys out there, hang in there. The right one will come along. You keep praying for it. And then lastly, my hobbies, I like to fish, pond fish a lot, bass and brim. It's a good time right now before it gets hot. I play tennis and golf and support my family in church. And roll tide.
My name is Don Menendez. I'd originally wanted to say, you already seen the biographical information. There's not much really to add to that. But for some context, I grew up in a lot of different places. My dad worked for IBM, which at the time stood for I'm Being Moved. Went to 4 different high schools, so a little bit different than Brooks's experience. And it actually ended up working for IBM, and that's what brought us to Birmingham about 4 years ago. My wife worked for IBM as well. When we got here, and in about 6 months, we knew we had to figure out a way to stay, which was a difficult thing to do back in those days, because when they asked to move you, it wasn't a question, it was a command. So we were fortunate to figure out a way to stay in Birmingham. We've been here 40 years, raised our 4 children here. We've got 9 grandchildren who live here. And I think really a more interesting thing is that I've never had a mentor in my business career. My only mentor really was my father. He died when I was about 30. So I was just coming into that time in the family life and career where there were a lot of times I wish you could have asked him, what about this? What do you think about this decision, this kind of thing? But I did have the ability to do that. Great father. But when I came along in my career, I don't know if it's the same experience for others, but I think mentoring was much more organic. In your organization or your profession, there might be somebody a little bit further along that took an interest in you, and actually did some real mentoring, not just managing and leading, but mentoring. And I just never had one of those opportunities. Certainly a lot of wise people were a year ahead of me that I was able to call on for advice and counsel, but I never actually had that experience. And it was something that I really wish that I had had. So that's about it.
My name is Jordan Weaver, and as Rob mentioned, I'm 27 years old and moved to Birmingham in 2016 when I went to Samford University. And while I was at Samford, I played football there. And then when I was a senior, I met a girl who's now my wife. We got married last December, so newly married. And also while I was at Samford, I met a guy who became a mentor, really helped get me on a career path. And just on the topic of mentoring, I would say that, in my short career, pretty much everything I've done is a direct result of having a mentor.
Well, so let's build on that. Would you guys each maybe just describe a mentoring experience that you've had that was memorable? Could be good, could be challenging, but share a little bit about just your impressions and experiences with mentoring.
Yeah, I do several sessions in my mentoring experience with YBL, and one of them is on marriage, and I recommend the book His Needs, Her Needs. But in that book, it talks about when your wife treat her real special. It's always recommend, why don't you just go get some flowers and mail a card to her unannounced, unexpected, not a birthday or wedding anniversary, and just see how your wife reacts. And he comes back the next week, go, wow, that was a great idea. The 12 roses really worked well. So as a mentor, it's nice to see a protege actually follow something that you think works. And it does work, and it did work. And so as a kind of like a teacher, it's good to see the student implement something that worked for them, and it gives you satisfaction being a mentor.
They gave us these questions ahead of time, so just FYI. I was thinking about that, and I really want to get a little higher up in the question. I think for me, the most memorable mentoring experiences have been typically when the person that you're talking with, a man you're talking with, and I'm sure you've had this happen, they forget that you're there. And they're almost talking to themselves. And it seems when I think about some memorable times, that's a common occurrence. And what really happens is that there's just enough air in the space to allow them to really solve their own problems, or give you an opportunity then to follow up with a much more important question. And I'm gonna, because the person isn't anywhere in this room, I don't think there's any way out there, a really quick funny story that every man that I've ever told it to can understand and relate to. A young man, maybe 15 years younger than me, was in my office, sitting out in a mentoring relationship. His organization had just decided to, it was a family business, to get out of the business. He wouldn't borrow the family. He found himself in his early 30s, mid 30s, with no income, and a transition underway, and he had three kids. And he got to that point in the conversation, and I remember he was looking out the window, and he said, and the timing's really bad. I just bought my wife that new Mercedes station wagon, and we didn't really need a Mercedes station wagon, and we just bought a new house. Oh gosh, we bought too much house, and I knew I was buying too much house. And he paused, and he looked out the window, and he said, and if it was just me and my dog, I could get along on $10,000 a year. and that's what he needed to do. To actually articulate, okay, this is really where I find myself, and now what do I do with that? So memorable times in mentoring for me are when they forget that you're there.
I think this is an easy question for me, just thinking back to the start of my career, which was not that long ago. But I think it's hard for young men to really decide. We were talking about this before, actually, just what they feel called to do or what they're interested in, or I think there's a lot of young guys who really have no idea what to do after college, and they're just kind of looking on how to get started. And so, for me, there was a guy who was a mentor for me, and that I met while I was at Samford, who really just helped me figure that out. He just kind of made introductions for me all across town, banking, insurance, went and met with a bunch of people, and I would come back and he would ask, how'd it go? And I'd say, it went great, but I just don't know if I'm interested in this. And eventually I had so many meetings that I think he got tired of making those introductions, and he said, "Hey man, you can come work for me, or you're gonna have to find somebody else to give you an introduction." I didn't even fully understand what he did. And so that was how I got into real estate. I went and started working for him, and it's like, man, having a lot of fun. I really enjoy real estate. So that was easily very memorable, as that was kind of the start of my career. But what I'll add to that is that I've now had the opportunity to also be a mentor to some younger guys. And that in and of itself has been extremely memorable. And I think that you just learn so much from being a mentor and being able to hear what's going on in guys' lives and start to be able to teach them. And I think I'll probably talk about this some later, but I think you probably get more out of it or learn more from being the teacher than even being a guy who has a mentor.
Okay, one of the most common questions we get when people start getting serious about mentoring is, does a mentor have to be a friend? How do you approach mentoring just with the whole friendship dynamic? What does that look like? And just from the experiences you've had, what would you guys say about that?
Yeah, you certainly can be a friend, but I found when my mentoring through YBL, the guys in their 20s, I'm not their friend, I don't know them, but one advantage of not being a friend, sometimes I think they're more open with you, they're willing to discuss things, or sensitive, that they were talking to a friend, they, I might hurt his feelings, I might affect my friendship, or I'm just a old cadre guy that's been through a lot of experiences. They kind of, I think sometimes can be more honest and not so inhibited in what they speak about and tell you about. They're not afraid of hurting my feelings.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's a possibility, and I know some of you have done this, but friendships usually happen organically, and I don't think it's important for it to turn into a friendship. And to Brooks's point, sometimes if there's a pretty big age difference, it would have to be almost a manufactured kind of thing. It's a very unusual thing to really become a really close friend like that. And if you do it with a number of people, unless you're a real extrovert, having the bandwidth to be a really good friend with a number of folks, it makes it a little bit harder. But I don't think it's at all necessary. And sometimes my experience has been that it's counterproductive. But I'm an introvert.
I think I may differ slightly from these two guys. I think it definitely can be both. I don't think you have to be a friend or a best friend to a guy that you're mentoring. But I will say that I do think some of the most powerful mentoring relationships, when you get deep enough with somebody, you just end up becoming a friend and start to care about their life and get involved with their life, and you want to hear about what's going on and you want to spend time together. And I think there's some pretty powerful conversations that can come out of just being in more of a friendship and not so much of a formal mentoring situation.
All right, so you almost anticipated my next question with your answer there, Jordan. As you think about mentoring, so the question about friendships is a common one. One of the other ones is, well, what does mentoring look like? Should it be formal with like structured meetings and topics, or should it be more kind of free-flowing? How does mentoring develop and progress? And so I'd love to hear, just y'all are different men, what would you say?
Yeah, when we first meet, we just get to know each other, and of course they're looking for, what can you tell me that you know at age 69 that would help me at age 25 to not make so many mistakes in life, whatever. So I kind of have a more structured approach where I would go through things, and at the end of the session then ask, do you have any questions or thoughts, or come back next week with it. I start out with first session, we meet each other, get to know each other. Second session, we talk about spiritual things like you need a quiet time. You need 3 or 4 memory verses you can pull up in the heat of battle to give you strength through the God in Jesus, and give him some things that worked in my life. And of course, they can then develop their thing. Well, here's what I struggle with in my religion or whatever. It opens up. The second session I do on marriage, and we talk about how to become a good husband, a good father, a good family man. And I recommend the book His Needs, Her Needs, and how to make your wife feel special, and again like that. And the third session I talk about work, like, be on time, return emails, text on a prompt basis. You'll be in the top 10% of the world. That kind of things that I've learned over my career, and what your boss looks for, don't get behind without telling them about it, that kind of things. And then I usually open it up to their questions, and a lot of times they'll come back the next week and go, I thought about what you said. what do you think about this? And that opens up the channels of what we talked about. But I think the guys I talk to are coming to me as kind of a teacher mentor. What can I know that you know that will help me in life?
I think for me, it's real important to set expectations up front, because I've had situations where maybe through YBL or somebody else that we don't have the same expectations. What the protege is looking for, I didn't really understand, or they didn't understand. So I like to find out, what do they hope to accomplish? I think it's really helpful up front. And then I think the other thing about at least a little bit of structure is what the expectations are, is who's bringing, in my business, I've always asked this: whose meeting is it? I want to know who's in charge, and what are we trying to accomplish at the end of the meeting? And if you don't do at least a little bit of that, maybe in a little nicer way, then who's bringing the agenda? And I've had some where they wanted to bring the agenda, and others where they wanted me to bring the agenda. We talk more about it if they want me to bring the agenda, try to understand what it is they're interested in. And then I think the most important thing is, if you haven't done it before, give them an easy off ramp. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to meet for 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, whatever it is you agreed to, and give them an easy off ramp for if it's not working, because most people are nice. And they're not going to tell you, this is just not working for me. And they need an opportunity to know they can get off. So say something like, however you want to do that. And for me, it's always, we're going to do this, and it may not work out. I might not be the kind of guy that can really speak into your life. And so here's what we'll do. It's 7 weeks. That 7th time, I'm going to sit down and ask you, how's it working? Is this good for you? Do you still want to do it? And it's a guilt-free zone to be able to say, probably not now. Because I've had somewhere I haven't done that, and it just elongates. I know they're not getting anything out of it, or at least I sincerely believe that, and they feel guilty about pulling out, or they just stop coming and they start missing.
I think it's important to talk about how there's different kinds of mentorship. Mentoring doesn't have to be a super long-term relationship. You may have a big impact on someone just from meeting with them one time and offering some advice. So there can be multiple types of mentoring. I do think that some structure helps mentoring, but I think that it really can be wide-ranging. I think it's important to talk about what the topic is going to be, or what the structure is going to be before you meet, so that there's kind of an understanding and clear expectations. But I think it could be anything from your career to a specific topic within faith, or really any aspect.
Okay, so this is kind of a wide open question. I would love to just hear from you. What are kind of just some of the best tips and nuggets you picked up as you've been mentors? So maybe especially for Brooks and Dom, and Jordan, feel free to chime in, but what are some of the best tips that you've experienced? Like, hey, this could really help things go well. I think you just gave us a couple of those as far as the structure and timing and expectations. What else would you say on that?
I think what helps me in mentoring is give specific examples. Anytime you're trying to teach somebody something, give specific examples. For instance, in that second session on marriage, I say, you really want to make your wife feel special. That's a big need for your wife to feel special. And us guys, we don't think about, okay, anniversary, I got it covered, but go send a card in the mail. My wife loves a card in the mail versus me handing it to her in the kitchen table. Anyway, something like little things you figure out that your wife really likes. And sometimes I'll just bring home a dozen roses just unannounced. Just thank you for the wonderful meals you're cooking, taking all the laundry and taking care of the kids and all that. Anything that makes her feel special. And us guys a lot of times don't think strategically about it. You get the big dates down, but it's the little things on top of that that really makes them feel that you were thinking of me while you were at work, or you were thinking of me while you, whatever. And so I give specific examples so they can actually take those and use them, instead of just saying, we need to make your wife feel special. Well, what does that mean? Mr. Henderson, well, I give examples. So.
That's good. I've kind of focused on 2 areas here, 2 different areas. One is, don't be afraid to tell stories in this context. Some people are natural storytellers, and that's great. Others are not, and may think it's not appropriate. But stories are great memory hooks. They just really are. Think about a good sermon or a good talk that you've heard, professionally or otherwise. Stories are great memory hooks, and what I found is the most profound and helpful stories are stories of failure, where you failed, where things hadn't worked out the way that you wanted to work out. There's all sorts of places people go to get all the top 7 things to do to be wonderful, how to be the most effective manager, how to do this and the other. But what they really need to know is, here are the places, the pitfalls, the places where you can fall and you can recover from. And that seems to resonate more. So and everybody can tell that story about themselves. If you're honest, we've all got plenty of those opportunities. So first one is to tell stories. The second one is more practical that I thought about, that, in business and in your profession, if you had an opportunity, your position of leadership, you have people that are working under you, or you're working with you, but they're more junior or whatever, and you have one-to-ones with them, one-to-one sessions. If you plan for those sessions, a lot of those questions that you ask in the business context are great questions in the context of a mentoring. I wrote down a couple of them, just went back and looked at what I asked. Here's one that I think works well. What has become clear since the last time we met? Big open question. I use these for work, but for mentoring they work as well. Second one is, what's the most important decision that you're facing, and what's keeping you from making that decision? I could talk multiple sessions on that, right? And then another one in that kind of same vein is, what do you currently think is impossible to do that, if it were possible, it would change everything? It could be in your life, in your marriage, in your, where you're worshiping. It could be in your career. But the idea of just thinking about the things that you use that are effective in leading people and discussing with people and in your own organization or profession, those are really transferable. And I like easy. So not having to remake everything makes it easy when you're mentoring. You go back and look what you're already doing someplace else.
The only thing I think I would add is I think it does help for the mentor to be a little bit vulnerable with the mentee, just to open up the conversation a little bit. And I could say that, having been on both sides, I think mentees oftentimes are a little bit anxious or nervous to overshare and don't want to put too much weight on the conversation initially, but oftentimes they would like to go a little bit deeper. And so I think it does help for the mentor to kind of initiate that vulnerability. And it doesn't have to be your most private information or anything like that. Just a little bit to open the door to a little bit deeper conversation, I think, helps.
Jordan, on that last point, you've heard the phrase that wise leaders leave with a limp. And I think we have a small group rule in YBL that the transparency and honesty of a group will not go deeper than the honesty of the leader. And so in a one-to-one relationship, and I think you do need to have some wisdom, but I think that's really important, is to model for them that you can be honest and your head doesn't immediately explode. Because I think they're deeply afraid that if some of my failures were known, that my life would be over. And Brooks, you said it can be a great advantage if people don't know you as much. They must treat you like a doctor. It's like, I just met you and you want me to turn my head to cough, But there is that sense of like, hey, let's go deep quickly and set an expectation that we're going to talk about real things in this group. All right, so Jordan, you actually get the next question, and Don and Brooks, you could chime in if you like. But just from being a protege this last year, Jordan, I'd love to hear, what are some of the things that you just kind of feel like, man, these were really hot button issues for me? Because as men, as you consider possibly being a mentor, you'd like to know what are the young men wrestling with? It's probably the things that you're wrestling with are common to most. So would you share on that, please?
One thing I think that's important when you have a mentor is, I think I see, I think I fell victim to this when I was younger, and I think I see a lot of guys do this now, where they're really unprepared for the conversation. They know that they want a mentor, but they don't exactly know what to ask or what to talk about. And you have an incredible opportunity to learn from somebody who's had those experiences and successes and failures, and usually they're willing to share whatever you ask them. And so I think, certain topics vary among, person to person, but one thing that has really helped me is to really prepare for meetings with mentors and to come in one thing that I've done that has helped me a lot is to send a list of questions or a certain topic to the mentor ahead of time and let them have some time to really think about that and process that instead of kind of putting them on the spot. And a lot of times you'll get some pretty incredible responses by just going ahead and asking what you want to ask and being a little bit thoughtful, intentional about it.
You know, that one thing of, I worked at a Fortune 500 company, Sonat, and one of the guys, older guys, kind of told me up front that when you have the opportunity to be on a task force or something and get your face in front of other decision makers in the company, to go ahead and make the extra effort to be on that. And it ended up being where, by doing that, I had like 6 different jobs over the first 20 years of my career by just getting in front of people, you know, which gave me a background for the company and the last 20 years in the race department. But that was some good mentoring advice from an elder businessman in my company. It was a large company, but that kind of thing that sticks out in my mind in the work front that helped me a lot.
That's great. And again, Jordan, on that too, I appreciate the honesty that, you know, you may be mentoring someone who really wants to learn from you, but doesn't know how to ask. And so one of the reasons why all 3 of these men are very different in their approaches and their personalities. And I want you to all hopefully feel the freedom that the way God's shaped you is not a mistake, and that you can mentor others out of the personality that you have, whether it's formal or structured, whether you've got plan or you're kind of just listening carefully and following, sort of the clues that you're picking up. The last piece, though, is I'm convinced most of you are here because it would be important to you how, through a mentoring relationship, can you have an impact on this person for God. So being a Christian, I'd love for each of you to share, like, how does being a Christian shape the way you think about mentoring, as opposed to, I got books down here that are Princeton, Harvard, Business Review, mentoring books. What's different and uniquely Christian about the way you think about mentoring?
I guess it comes from the focus as, Jesus came to serve others, and that book is not about you, is the opening statement. So kind of the mode of, I'm here now to serve others and in my life, particularly as I'm retired and have more time. So that kind of affects my overall viewpoint that, to serve others, and particularly in this case, young men that can get some nuggets of wisdom, hopefully from me, and progress in their life on a quicker pace than I did, and new things that work for me that they may not be doing as yet. But serving others is kind of my forte.
That's great. The concept of mentoring is not the Christians don't haven't cornered that market. Matter of fact, we're probably in some ways in the business world a little late to that market. So everybody understands that what the transfer that's supposed to happen is that the mentor is sharing hopefully some wisdom, some knowledge, and some experience, and some advice and counsel is appropriate. But a Christian mentor, I just would, if as a Christian, I don't think you can enter into this relationship and have any kind of separation between your faith and your belief and the advice and counsel you're giving, particularly as it relates to work. And that's a place I would just encourage everybody. There's much more of that in the last 10 or 50 years out there for young people to look and ask the question about how do I really integrate my faith life with my work life? How do I really do that? Because it's a very difficult place to do it. And typically preachers from the pulpit don't know or can't help you with that. And certainly a place like YBL has the opportunity to do that. But Christian mentoring, I think, is an incredible opportunity so that the questions become really easy, but really hard. Ask that protege, well, have you prayed about this? And really mean it, seriously. Because if he's a believer and he's just talking about it, haven't prayed about it, that's the best advice you could actually give him, and hold him to account for that. Have you actually prayed about this? Or maybe, what do you know about God that informs this particular situation that you're in at work? And so I think a Christian mentor has the privilege of sitting at the crossroads between faith and work. And it's an incredibly important crossroads, and that we have to be convicted to be willing to be vulnerable, actually, to ask those hard questions. Because you're going to get a million answers. Well, I'm in the corporate world, I can't do that. Well, really? Or, I would get sued if I thought that way or took that action or whatever. And so it takes, obviously, wisdom to be able to work through that. But another good question is that you're not going to get from a non-Christian mentor is, so how do you think, Bill, your sinfulness is impacting the particular circumstances you find right now? You should just call them on that, because we all know we're sinful. And sometimes I think that's the jewel, not sometimes, that is clearly the jewel of Christian mentoring. Being able to say, all of my wisdom and experience needs to come from the Lord, and all of my failures are coming from me, and that there's the crossroads where I live, and how might we be able to address and speak to what you're going through right now from that perspective. There are not very many people in their lives, I don't think, my experience has been, going to ask them those direct questions in that way. And I think that's a real blessing.
I think that Christian mentoring there's really no limit. Whereas if it's a mentor relationship just at work, your topic maybe confined only to career and work. Whereas in a Christian mentoring situation, you can really talk about all aspects of the mentor, the mentee's life. Another thing I would add is just that, Scripture pretty clearly calls us to discipleship, and mentoring, whether through work or through YBL, is really just a form of discipleship. We're creating disciples and hoping that whoever you mentor may mentor others. Proverbs 27:17 comes to mind. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And really, I think that's what this is all about. It's just about trying to share wisdom and encourage others, because we're all sinful. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. But, we just try to encourage each other and build each other up.
But I'm so grateful y'all have come today. I'm going to close this with prayer, and then we'll be dismissed. Father, we are so grateful that you have given us this opportunity to be together and to learn a little bit more how we might be more effective in coaching, encouraging, serving others. God, we know that you alone are capable to counsel and encourage and lead. So God, we want to be submissive to you, to follow you, and to bring others with us. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you all.